Hello, everybody. So my name is Adam Handfinger. I co-founded Document Crunch with Josh Levy, who was my one-time law clerk and associate, and then became a client of mine. And through the work I was doing for his company, he and I came up with this idea a few years ago, and spent a number of years building this. We've got, I think I saw Kyle Dunca's on. Kyle's our sort of jack of all trades, heads up our success solution team. Any tech issues or ideas or things like that, Kyle usually fields those. He's been with us since before Document Crunch was named Document Crunch. So that's how long he's been working with Josh and I. And Lindsay Miller, really proud to have her as our newest team member. She's head of sales for Document Crunch. I think some of you already know her. So really happy to have her on today as part of our team. I think that's everyone from our team that's on. So with that, I'll flip it back over to Josh.
Yeah, so Adam just gave you a little bit of a sneak peek, but before we kind of get into the presentation itself, I think the story kind of behind this is always what people are super interested in. So, I don't know how much you all look at construction tech and software applications for our industry, but the feedback that we've gotten on this journey is that, tech companies in our industry are really just that normally. That's kind of the table stakes, right? Tech entrepreneurs are looking to break into the massive construction industry, which is underserved in tech adoption. But the techies that are coming into this industry, they have no appreciation for the nuances of the construction industry and the day-to-day pain points for construction operators like some of you on this call. And so the products that this industry gets to use, the tech that we get to use, appears a bit disconnected or tone deaf. And we think that really our origin story is important because that's what really differentiates us from really a lot of the other tech that's out there that you all may be seeing and that we've seen in our own journey. We're actually construction guys who get the industry. We're not software experts. We're not we had no background in this before we figured out the solution. And I think the story of how we got here is really worth mentioning. So as Adam started, talking about before, I'm a construction management major from the University of Florida. Jay was hoping that I had some Philadelphia Eagle or Northeast stuff on the wall behind me. I don't. I'm a South Florida guy. I went to the University of Florida, graduated with a degree in construction management, and I realized that while I love the construction industry, I didn't want to be a project manager. So I went to law school, and my first job in law school, my first summer was clerking for really arguably the best construction law firm in the country. At the time I was in the Miami office, and I was clerking for a young partner named Adam Handfinger, who happens to be on this call and the co-founder of Document Crunch. Adam's not so young anymore. He's now the managing partner of that office, but back then he was. And, Adam taught me much of what I know about the construction, law world, if you will. And I eventually ended up working at his firm full time. And about 6 years ago, I decided, and for reasons we'll get into today, I decided to leave private practice in South Florida. And I transitioned up to the Atlanta area where I am now to go in-house with an E&R top 50 contractor, right? So I transitioned from outside counsel to inside counsel for a top general contractor. And I actually ascended at that contractor into the leading role of the legal department in the Southeast. So I quickly became, I was the regional general counsel of a over $1 billion a year construction business. And in that role, I quickly became overwhelmed with just the velocity of what was going on in the market, right? As everyone on this call knows, contractors and subcontractors, we all bid a lot more work than we actually win. And if we're doing it right, we're qualifying those bids and understanding the risks in those bids. So that was kind of one pain point I started observing because those qualifications are usually overseen by a lawyer like me or a seasoned executive in the industry. And what I was noticing after bid and award was that I would negotiate a complex contract with a seasoned exec. So I first was reading the contract at the bid stage. Then I was negotiating that same contract with a seasoned exec at my company. And then, kind of after the fact, inevitably on every single one of these projects, I'd get a knock on my door 6-7 months later from a young project manager or someone who was not involved in bidding or negotiating the contract. And they'd say, Josh, something happened today on our project site. What does our contract say, right? I almost felt like Siri for contracts. I constantly had pretty sharp people coming in my office just saying, what does our contract say? What does our contract say? And oftentimes what they were asking me about were the very same issues that I was qualifying at the bid stage, the very same issues that I was negotiating during the award stage. And so there was just a lot of redundancy with the same exact types of issues. And I was just pulling out the same contract time after time after time. So with this dynamic in mind and being understaffed, I'd reached back out to my old friend Adam, who, again, wasn't so young anymore. And I asked him to help support me on the bid quals. And it was certainly fun to transition to his client where I could finally start calling some shots. And Adam and his team did a great job for me, really just hunting for the very same provisions that I was constantly dealing with and that Adam had taught me about 10 years before. And so the cycle was just going on and on. But one of the reasons why I left private practice was I couldn't stand the billable hour. And Adam may not want to hear that, but it's true. I mean, I found that to be contrary and repugnant to just, kind of good business sense. So I started challenging Adam and his team to start providing me flat fee, arrangements or GMP kind of arrangements for providing me these bid quals, right? So don't bill me by the hour for this. I want cost certainty. So Adam all of a sudden started getting very concerned that, millennials like me were starting to take over legal departments, and that he was going to have to start thinking about how he was going to deliver his legal services maybe a little bit differently than he had in the past. So Adam approached me, and Adam's done some pretty cool stuff aside from being the managing partner of a big construction law firm that represents all the top general contractors. But Adam approached me and started, challenging me about how we understood that natural language processing, which Adam can discuss in a bit more detail later on, was being used in big use cases for top, I'm going to say Fortune 100 companies, really sophisticated law firms. They were using AI and natural language processing to speed up contract reviews or other document reviews. So Adam just came to me and said, look, why don't we just go find the solution for the construction industry? This is being used by others. And you're going to be a hero at your, in-house because you're overwhelmed and you need to do more with less. And your company's telling you they're not going to hire a bunch more lawyers to support you. And I can be a hero when I'm having to deal with pain in the butt millennials like you and having to, deliver a little bit more cost certainty on my reviews. So we said, great. So the two of us about 2.5 years ago set out to go and find that solution, which we just assumed existed. And what we quickly realized 2.5 years ago when we started to do this were two things. One, there was absolutely no solution for the construction industry. And I think everybody on this call would agree. It's not just the legal issues that make our industry unique. It's a lot of the business issues or the delivery issues. Construction is just different. You can't apply generic contract reviews and analysis to the construction industry. It's different. We just do things different. Okay. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing that we realized was even in those use cases where, NLP was being used for other contract reviews, there wasn't anything that was consumer facing, if you will. And so I'll kind of go back to my role. So as lawyers, the first thing that people always ask me was, what is important in this document? So we there was nothing that was answering that for construction. And then the second thing that people always ask me is, well, why do I care? And there was certainly nothing in any industry that was using AI to help answer that. So those were kind of the two gaps that we saw. And that was just mind-boggling to us, which kind of led us down this journey that we're on now, which is having founded Document Crunch. And Adam will tell you more about the product. But what we also realized at that moment in time when we saw these two big gaps was that our industry actually has a much bigger problem than that which confronts Adam and I, right, in our roles. And this is something that I just want to speak to, and then we'll get into the product itself. But our industry has been grappling with managing risks in construction contracts for many years. And what's happened is there's been two classes of, I would say, companies that have emerged, okay? The first class is what I'll call the over-investors. The over-investors are people that recognize that there's just huge risks in construction contracts. One bad term can torpedo a company, right? So there are companies like top E&R contractors or really big subcontractors that actually invest substantial resources to have guys like me sit in-house and be Siri for contracts for them, right? They hire legal departments. They hire risk management departments. They go ahead and pay guys like Adam $600 an hour to do reviews. Whatever it is, they're throwing all this money at this problem. And that is certainly a robust approach to managing risk in construction contracts. But as I was sitting there looking at it, I was thinking there's a couple of conditions that emerge there. One, I mean, the obvious kind of superficial answer is, great. So as you take on more work, you need to keep adding that overhead, right? And we all know that construction profits aren't going up and projects aren't becoming less sophisticated. So, okay, that's kind of an impossible dilemma, right? Contracts are definitely more complex than they were 20 years ago, and profits are not going up. So you have to add overhead to manage this risk. If you just kind of were an over investor, like the companies that frankly Adam and I have been advising our whole careers. The other kind of, I'd say, more latent issue for the over investors is this, and maybe I'm giving away big secrets, but hopefully you all will appreciate this. I know, because for the last 6 years, I've been sitting in-house for these top E&R contractors and seeing this firsthand. Okay. There is a pinch point of information that they hire guys like me to sit essentially in the ivory tower, the C-suite, whatever you want to call it, and tell them all the risks that are in their documents. That's awesome. I have a very hard time democratizing that subject matter expertise out into the field to all the people who need it, right? Going back to the young PM who's coming in my office asking me, what do I do, right? The reality is that that young PM is smart enough to understand what to do, but they're just have become so reliant on me that they're constantly coming in my office to ask for advice on what to do. So how can I alleviate being a pinch point, right? I can't be sitting in every project trailer or with every bid proposer on every single aspect of our operation. So there's a pinch point. So that's the conundrum that the over investors have, right? They're spending a lot of money and have to resource up. And there's really a pinch point going on where these subject matter experts just are not getting the information out most efficiently to all the people who need that information to deal with the day-to-day issues where you need to administrate a construction contract. But perhaps, and maybe on this call, this will be even more relevant to this, I'm going to call the other class of the industry, which is not the top E&R 50 contractors or those that are big enough to have full legal departments or risk management departments. The other class of the industry are the under investors. And this was what Adam and I were just totally fixated on when we came up with this idea. The under investors are all the small to mid cap companies who I estimate make up over 80% of this industry. Many of those are super concerned and understand inherently how risky construction documents are. They're just using underqualified personnel every single day to help advise them on those because they don't have the overhead or volume that would be required to incur the overhead to hire guys like me to sit there full time. Or they don't view it as being efficient to hire guys like Adam to review every single piece of paper that comes across their desk. So who are these types of companies? These types of companies are companies where you see, senior vice presidents of operations or project executives or pre-con folks, or even sometimes they're using insurance brokers to help tell them the risks in the contracts that they're qualifying or negotiating or whatever it is. And those companies, I believe, our thesis is those companies are one bad term away. They're playing Russian roulette because they're using underqualified personnel to help them navigate the day-to-day risks which are inherent in their documents. And we believe that they're not getting a great enough appreciation for those risks. And frankly, they just don't have a better option. So in response to that big conundrum that we've observed in this industry, and in response to the gaps that we saw where AI wasn't really filling the needs that our industry had, Adam and I decided to go on this journey where we founded Document Crunch. And so I'll let Adam now kind of take it from here and talk about the actual solution and what it is. But that's kind of the backstory to why we're here.
So like Josh said, the idea was to come up with something that deploys AI specifically for the industry, but that's fast, easy, and cost effective. In my role as a managing partner of a law firm, I spend a lot of time buying technology. And I always found that I felt that I was either overpaying for tech I wasn't going to use, or I was underpaying and I was going to overuse, neither of which made me comfortable. So the idea was to come up with something that was usage-based There's no commitments. You can do one document at a time, and is relatively cost effective. I mean, it's less than half an hour of what you would pay me to review hourly to review your contracts. So Josh, you want to go to the next slide? There's a bunch of different solutions on our site specifically for construction. We review construction contracts, and we review over 40 critical provisions like warranty obligations, the right to stop work. Is there design responsibility imposed per the contract? Are you responsible for hazardous materials, subsurface conditions? What happens on termination? Is there fiduciary obligations? All the critical risk provisions that I've trained my team of lawyers, and Josh was one of them, to look for when they review a contract. We find those provisions for you in a matter of minutes. We also have a project cheat sheet that works with construction contracts so that in addition to finding the 40 most critical provisions, we find the top 10 provisions that your project teams need, where to send notice letters, what's required for change orders, what are the schedule obligations, the same things that when Josh described himself as Siri for contracts, the same questions that project teams ask all the time. Document Crunch provides a way for you to give everyone on your team an interactive project cheat sheet to find those top 10 provisions. Josh, go to the next slide.
Hey, Adam, if I could just though maybe put a bow on what we're saying. So you go back to like what companies pay lawyers like us to do, right? The first question that they always ask is, well, what do I care about? So we've trained AI to define what those parameters are across all construction documents that we would otherwise look at. And I know Adam's going to go to the next thing, but that first question is critical because that actually represents a large portion of the expenditure of engaging lawyers, right? Tell me what I care about in this contract.
Right. So, and it's been interesting because the idea of even just identifying the important provisions and making a list of them, forgetting about the fact that we find them for you in the contract, even just having that list has resonated with everyone from in-house lawyers for E&R top 50 contractors to small and mid-sized trade contractors that I know from being, in the industry for so long. That in and of itself has proven to be powerful. One of the problems that I've seen and Josh has seen in the industry is insurance policy reviews. We've always said, in order to know exactly what coverage you're getting, you need to review the entire policy. That includes policies that you're purchasing. That includes policies that others are providing you, like subtrades, owner's builder's risk. Maybe there's a wrap on your project, either an OSIP or a CSIP. And while you get certificates of insurance and policy manuals and other documents that describe and summarize the policy, you really need to review the entire policy to know whether or not there's an exclusion that could impact coverage and what the other requirements are. The response has always been from my clients, listen, Handfinger, that's great advice from a fancy lawyer at a big firm sitting in an ivory tower. But how are we supposed to have our people on the ground review all of these insurance policies? It's just not practical. And they're right. So Document Crunch, you can upload an insurance policy and we find the important provisions. We'll let you know where the additional insured language is. For those of you doing residential work, is there a residential exclusion? What are the exclusions to coverage? What are the exceptions to the exclusion? Are there subrogation rights? What are the deductibles? Self-insured retentions? What are the provisions to have the policy canceled? And many more. But the idea would be you upload an insurance policy, and within a matter of minutes, not only are we identifying for you what the important provisions are, we're actually finding them. Josh, next slide. So one of the things that when Josh and I started this and the site went live, we sent it out to friends and family, which were all of our industry contacts. And it started with just a contract review solution and insurance policies. And someone said to us, well, have you tried running spec books and plans through the solution? And we asked why. And the response was, well, and it was just a casual conversation over a beer at the time. This was before we were all on lockdown. Well, I'm always curious what's in those spec books because they're long and I don't really read them other than for my own technical requirements that apply to me. And the plans got to have a lot of notes on them and we don't know what's in them. So we ran a set of plans and we ran a spec book. And Josh and I both were shocked at the risks that we found hidden in the technical specifications, which are typically a contract document, and in the drawing notes. We found things like responsibility for hazardous materials on the last page of a sheet of plans. You know, I've never been asked as a construction lawyer to review a set of plans for risk shifting provisions. I've certainly never been asked to review technical specs for risk shifting provisions. And we found them. We found limitations of liability in the spec book, fiduciary duties. We found order of precedence language that modified which contract document took priority over others. Warranty obligations, design responsibility. All of this information was in the very unlikely place of drawing notes and spec books. So we created a solution where you can upload your plans, where you can upload your spec book and identify whether or not these critical provisions exist. So let me now jump in and quickly show you what this looks like. So again, our site is designed to be very user-friendly. She hates this when I use her as an example, but my mom was our guinea pig. Once my mom was able to upload a document and get there without asking me a question, I knew we had an easy to use platform. So the front end platform, it's at documentcrunch.com. You can go there. You should be able to navigate it without any assistance needed, although Kyle's contact information will be provided. And you go on, you create an account, you can buy one upload at a time, and then you're prompted basically to upload a document and select the document type and the solution that you want to run on it. Once you do that, you then get usually it's only a few minutes, you'll get an email saying that your crunch is ready. When you log in, what you're going to see is the table of contents that Josh is currently showing. That table of contents will identify down the page all of the provisions that we've looked for and tried to identify for you.
Hey,
Josh, something keeps popping up on the screen.
yeah, so I actually wanted to just share this. If you all, can you all see this checklist as well?
Yes, we see it.
Okay. So that, you know, in addition to the table of contents view for the users that are actually customizing their own solutions with us, we're actually curating unique customized checklists based on what's important to that end user to help automate, you know, the review as well. So this is just another view that isn't currently in the out of the box platform that if you were using one document at a time, but it kind of shows the ability to customize this for your own uses. So this is one that we recently finished for a top contractor that's using us on an enterprise solution. Keep going, Adam.
Okay, so on the table of contents, all of the provisions that we find for each of the different document types and solutions are listed down the page. If we find, and that's just showing a small fraction of them, if we find the provision type, you'll see there's a hyperlinked page number in the page citation column. Sometimes there's more than one instance, so you'll get more than one page number. If we don't find a provision, we say no matching provision tagged, which means it may not be, likely is not there. So in this example, there is no prevailing party attorney fee provision that we identified. Josh, go to the next slide. So now also in the table of contents, and Josh alluded to this, for each provision type, we have a rationale and insights and a sample language. So this is an example of the rationale and insights for duration for performance and contract time. And what we provide here is an explanation of what the algorithm's looking for, but also some helpful tips and best practices for these types of provisions, what to look for, what your concerns are, ideas of how to make the provision that you may find in your contract better. It's as if, candidly, Josh and I wrote a legal treatise, an explanation on a provision by provision basis. One of the things that's a customized solution that's available, and we've been doing this for a bunch of contractors, is on their platform, the rationale and insights are tailored towards their organization. So if there is no prevailing party attorney fee provision, there could be an instruction here on this hover bubble that says you need to have a prevailing party attorney fee provision. Or if there is one, maybe your policy is we don't want one, right? Josh, next slide. We also have sample language. So if you're negotiating a contract and your organization has agreed to specific language that should be used, you can insert it here. But our off-the-shelf product has sample language. So if you do not have a waiver or limitation of consequential damages, we've provided a generic version that can be copy and pasted right into your document, tagged to that provision. We provide that for each of these provisions. Now, once you see a provision that you want to find or you want to read off the table of contents, you click the page number and it takes you into the document. You'll see this is finding the algorithm for parties, it's identifying who the parties are. To the left is the image of the document, that page, and the relevant provisions highlighted. If you click on that provision, the identification of that provision on the right side turns blue, which I'll show you in a minute why that's important. From this page on the screen, you'll also see the links for rationale insights and sample language. You could also jump back to the table of contents. Josh, go to the next slide. So you'll see on this page, as an example, there's multiple provisions highlighted, making the identification to the right more important, because if you're curious what the highlighted language belongs to, you can right click or click over it and it will highlight it. You'll also see that the sample language is here. Josh, go to the next slide. And you can leave notes for one another. So we were very focused on making this a tool for collaboration purposes inside an organization. So here on this provision, I made a note at one point that says, Josh, please look at this to make sure it's consistent with the rest of the provisions in the contract documents. Now that note will stay with that provision. Josh can share this crunch with me. I view it without having to pay for it, and his note to me will be there. I have clients now reviewing documents with Document Crunch, making notes for me within the document, sending me the crunch, and directing me to the provisions that they want me to see, which is much more efficient than them sending me a contract and just saying, Handfinger, I don't know what's in this thing. Can you take a look at it and tell me what's important? So now, instead of me tasking someone on my team to review a document, tag it, and highlight it, it's coming to me with their suggestions for things to look at, and they can even put notes for me in the document. Josh, go to.
Yeah, the idea being that kind of going back to the thesis, right? It's our bet that if we identify, if we tell you that first question, what's important, and then we also tell you why it's important, that we believe that executives, non-lawyers, whatever, can take a lot of the legwork out of the contract review, thus narrowing the reliance on traditional resources like outside lawyers or inside lawyers or whatever it is. So that's the point, right? You may feel very comfortable that out of the 45 issues that we found, you get 38 of them. You understand your policies, you're seeing the language in real time, you're comparing it to your own language. But that's kind of the secret sauce here, is now you're sending guys like Adam perhaps just a few provisions to review, rather than just being totally overwhelmed and confounded by a big document that you're having to review kind of from scratch without that type of guidance.
Yeah, Josh, go back for a sec. The note features, as well as the modified hover bubbles, is a really good tool to take the information that exists at the executive level or the risk management level of an organization and push it down through to the folks on the ground actually doing the work. So oftentimes what I'm seeing my clients do is, even on the project cheat sheet, which is the tool for their project teams, they'll provide specific instructions in the notes on a provision by provision basis, further so that they can communicate that to their team. Josh, next slide. So this is getting to what Josh spoke about earlier. One of the options that's available on some of our packages is a customized checklist. So this started as a solution because a lot of our larger users, their in-house departments had questions that had to be answered for each contract. One of our users has almost 200 questions that their in-house lawyers are answering for each contract. And plugging through and hunting through the document to answer those questions was very time consuming. So we created a tool where we could load in their individual questions that are unique to their organization into a customized checklist. We provide the hyperlinks to answer the questions right next to the questions. And then they can answer those questions, yes or no, as you see there. They can make notes. And then there's even a field where there can be some organizational specific instructions and guidelines to those people reviewing the contracts. So now what this has done is it provides people who aren't lawyers or risk managers to make a first pass through the document, assess the risk of the document, and then forward this completed checklist onto others within their organization. It's been a very powerful tool. I've seen it work amazingly for large contractors, but also smaller and mid-sized contractors. We have one user now who we're working with their outside counsel to help develop a list of questions. And it's a very good way to get through a contract and at least get a high level review of what's risky and what's not. Josh, go to the next slide. So further to my point early on when I talked about some of the pain that I always feel as a consumer of enterprise technology solutions is the hidden pricing. Very rarely do you see pricing published. It's oftentimes requires multiple calls just to understand the pricing. And then there's this kind of battle between me as the purchaser and the tech solution provider to figure out what the best pricing for me is going to be. And I know I'm going to lose that battle because this is what these folks do all day long, and it's not my day to day. We publish our pricing online. This is on our website. This is available for everybody to see. You can go on without making any commitment in advance, and for $300, you can upload a document under any of the solutions. Like I said, that's about 30 minutes of my time. If you paid me hourly, so we think it's a pretty good value, and each crunch saves a ton of time. The more you purchase in bulk, the cheaper it gets. So, if you buy up to 250 at a time, it gets down to only $100 an upload. You can share those crunches or uploads throughout the organization and pool them among all of your users, so that it isn't on a user by user basis. Unlimited number of users, we don't charge per user. There's no setup fees. The customized solution is available with the medium, large, and enterprise packages. We charge $5,000 for the customized solution if you buy the medium package, $3,500 if you buy the large, and $2,000 if you buy the enterprise. So it's all right there. It's all transparent. And it's intended to be usage-based. Josh, go to the next slide. On our website, and these probably aren't even the most recent, but we've been really fortunate to get a lot of folks willing to publicly state the value that they're seeing with Document Crunch. So these are just some examples of in-house lawyers and owners of contractors. Josh, I see your calendar. And then Josh, if you can go to the next slide. And again, some more users and their stories. Like I said, there's a lot more on our website. And then this is just how to get in touch with either Josh or Lindsay. There's also a way on the site that you can click a link and schedule a demo to the extent you need one right on our calendars. And I'm guessing, Jay, we can share this with everyone. If Josh sends you the PowerPoint, you could probably share this with everyone on the call today, right? Absolutely, Adam. That wouldn't be a problem at all. Okay, great. I know we have an hour for this. Josh and I try to, we'll talk and fill up as much space as we give ourselves. So interestingly, we decided we needed to be right around the 35-minute mark, which we nailed. So I guess at this point, and Jay, I don't know how you all normally do this, but any questions or things we can answer for folks? Sure. If anyone has any questions, you can kindly unmute yourself and ask your question, or if you're not comfortable doing that, by all means, you can use the chat feature in the Zoom, and I will gladly ask your question for you. Okay. I have a technical question, if that's okay. Sure. Just out of curiosity, like I
use the search function within Bluebeam a lot to find keywords and things like that. And one of the challenges we have with documents from design teams that aren't so good is that the text isn't selectable and the search function is it's inhibited by that. How does your technology do with flattened documents or documents that have been photocopied in, things like that? How does it search for the relevant keywords that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, great question. Josh, can you go to slide number 12? So a couple things. I've had extremely poor experiences throughout my career with OCRing and searching PDFs and other documents that are, when you say flat, that don't have the metadata. So one of the things that's really amazing about this solution is it can read almost every document, no matter how granular. There are times, of course, that it's too grainy to read and we get an error message back. But for the most part, I've loaded up documents that I thought no OCR would ever be capable of putting together and reading. And our system's been able to read it. It was one of the reasons why we chose the backend provider that we did. But what we also provided, because we were getting feedback, and Bluebeam was the example that was used, that a lot of our users were struggling with even just keyword searching. So if you look on the top of the navigation pane to the right, we now created a search function. So you could type in keywords and navigate through the document with the previous result and next result, just like you could with a Control F on a Word document. And it works, it's elegant because our OCRing is so powerful. We're actually, the way we work is our system actually gathers all of the language off of the document and off a flat document. Everything is made into an image before it even gets uploaded, and then restates it. So we're actually searching the native language, even though the document that's uploaded might be flat. So, not only can we process very granular documents, but we also provide the word search feature in the navigation pane. So you can look for the words that are important to you.
I think, Jim, you were going to ask something. Jim Meyer.
If Jim wants to speak, by all means, he also put it in the chat box. So Jim, do you want to just ask your question?
Yeah, I can. I see the question, so I can. Yeah. If it's easier, I could just.
That's easier. That works.
Yeah, perfect. So, Jim, really good question. So, the first question is, what is the process after we crunch a document, or our current attorneys jump in and review? So that's obviously an individual company decision, but what I'm seeing a lot of clients do, like I said, they crunch the document. Within 2 to 5 minutes, it comes back that it's been processed. It's in their dashboard. What a lot of my clients are now doing is they're sharing that crunch with me as their outside lawyer, and I now am getting access to that crunch. I do not. You only pay to crunch it once, so you could share it with 100 people if you want. There's 2 ways to share. There's a dialog box where you click share and you type in the emails and you can leave a message, or you can create a link to the document and embed that link in an email and a Word file, wherever you want. And your lawyer or whoever you want can click the link and see the document. If they're not a user of Document Crunch, when you send them the link, they're prompted just to set up a username and password, but there's no charge again to share it. So again, a lot of people are using their lawyers that way and sharing it with them. They should not have an issue with the process. Josh and I are super obsessive compulsive lawyers. We spend a lot of time up front making sure that our security, we've got some users that have federal government contracts and security clearance. So we've had to satisfy their security requirements, and we've passed with flying colors. We had AXA do a full audit of us before making us part of their tech ecosystem. So we know that our security and our privacy policies comply with the best in class cyber security standards. So it's doubtful that there's any issue with that. Lawyers should not have any. And look, I'm outside counsel. I manage a team of 10 lawyers on a day-to-day basis. Plus, we have 150 within the firm. This certainly reduces the amount of time and the amount of money my clients pay me to review their contracts. But it's more efficient and it's better. So while some people initially in the legal profession will have an issue with this, because instead of me charging $4,000 for a contract, I could probably get through a client's contract now within less than an hour, even without them pointing me to specific questions in the contract. So there may be a little bit of pushback from counsel on something like that, but ultimately there's no reason why this is any different than if you reviewed the contract, highlighted it, and asked some specific questions. As far as things being overlooked, which is the third or fourth question in the chat, this is not perfect technology. It certainly is not. We're not guaranteeing that it's going to catch 100% of the things that you're looking for, that it should. But I will tell you, in our experience, it's been better than a human reviewer, because humans aren't perfect either. The system is never hungover. It's never tired. It's never rushing to get home to their family. Their friends aren't waiting for them down at the bar. I've had experiences where I've reviewed with clients the same contracts multiple times over the course of a long period of time, ran it through document crunch at the end as like a last look, and it caught things that we did not catch as the human reviewer, things that were in unlikely places, things that weren't worded the way we expected to see them. It was the best example I had was we had negotiated a very robust waiver of consequential damages, yet in an unlikely location of the contract, there was a language that arguably negated that provision. I missed it. My client missed it after reviewing the contract at least 6 times over the course of a few month period. That's because the computer algorithm has been trained to find that unique language. So no, it's not perfect. We disclaim that, obviously, but it's, in some respects, it's better and different than a human reviewer. Jeff Scarpello asked.
Yeah, Jeff's asking a follow-up to someone that just had chatted me directly about the jurisdiction. So I think that's an important topic.
Yeah, so
go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, so there's certain provisions that are uniquely different on a jurisdictional by jurisdictional basis. For instance, indemnity is one of those types of provisions. We don't identify and say this indemnity provision is good for the state of Kansas, but is not good for New York. We find the indemnity provision for you. Your lawyer or someone internally will ultimately have to make a decision whether or not that indemnification provision is appropriate for the jurisdiction that you're working on in the project. Now, in the sample language, we've tried to be very vanilla and tried to come up with language that's one size fits all. We do disclaim, particularly in instances like the indemnity, that this is oftentimes modified on and specific to a jurisdiction. So you should check with your advisor to make sure if that particular provision, would work with where you're doing business. That's not something that we answer.
Hey, Adam, I think though the important thing is, and someone else had messaged me about this on the side as well. The important thing though to consider is for the users that have bigger use cases with us, like at that medium level and up, we're actually programming this so that they can pick up those jurisdictional differences in the rationale and insights or in the workflow. Or, better yet, like I'll just tease this out so it's kind of real examples, right? Our preferred provision is X. If you can get this, use this one. If you can't get this one, here's our compromise position. Or we do work in the following 14 jurisdictions. Here's nuances you need to know about in those various jurisdictions. So this can be programmed for your purposes to pick up the jurisdictional nuances that you all would care about understanding. We're not going to do it off the shelf, to Adam's point. We're purposely meant to be generic off the shelf, but this can be tailored that way. Kind of going back to the whole, is there liability? How will the lawyers feel? I just thought an anecdote. This is kind of when I knew that Adam and I were onto something. We hadn't published Document Crunch yet. I had a very seasoned, good, well-paid construction practitioner working for me. And I had given her a $50 million contract to review. And she took every bit of 2 days to review that contract, right? So in Adam's world, that's a minimum of 15, 16 billable hours. In my world, that's 40% of the week she took to review that document for me. I ran it through Document Crunch, or what was going to be Document Crunch at the time. And in 15 minutes, I had a product back from Document Crunch and I compared it to what she did. And Document Crunch and her had agreed on 100% of the issues, except Document Crunch found 3 issues that she did not find. And Document Crunch did not find 1 issue that she did find. So I think it's an important anecdote because it kind of goes to this whole idea that, is this 100% perfect? No. But this is all subjective anyway. And on balance, the fact that I had somebody at that level that took 2 days to get me information back that was by and large substantially exactly the same of what a tool that took me 15 minutes to get back, that's when the light bulb went off for me. And I said, this is a total game changer for how I'm going about understanding what's in these documents. And, that anecdote is really consistent. Adam gave another example, but that anecdote is really consistent with what we're seeing across the board for how this works. Perfect? No. Super effective and timely and cost effective? Absolutely.
So there's another question. Can we give an example of the custom programming that would or could benefit us internally? Josh, do you maybe want to show the checklist that you showed earlier on as an example? But
yeah, absolutely. Let me just pull it up here. Hold on.
So I guess to get into the specifics, we could help you develop, if you don't already have developed, a list of questions that are important to you for each contract. So for instance, you may have decided that you're not going to sign a contract that doesn't have a mutual waiver of consequential damages, which quite frankly would be a little free legal advice, very good business sense, right? I think that contracts should have mutual waivers of consequential damages. So that might be a question. Is there a mutual waiver of consequential damages? You could answer yes, no. Here we have one user that instead of using yes or no, wanted to gauge the risk levels of each different issue. So design build, and then it takes you to the 2 page numbers. And then someone's reviewed that and assessed it as medium risk, for an example. So those are the 2 alternate ways. I don't know which would work better for each organization or which questions are most pressing for each organization, but that's something that could be that would be customized specifically for your needs. For instance, the right to stop work for non-payment, that may be a yes or no answer for you. If you don't have the right to stop work for non-payment, you don't want to go on the project. So if the answer to that is no, there is no right to stop work for non-payment, then there should be an instruction that says you need to either send this contract to someone or not sign it, or whatever your workflow is. We would build those instructions right into this document.
Yeah. Let me give again some like real world examples of how this is used, from just like what you're seeing. So go back to the pain points that I was describing, right? And there's different pain points in the process, but go back to the one where I have a project manager that comes in my office and says, "Hey Siri, what does my contract say? Something happened on the job site." Before Document Crunch, that's what's happening 100% of the time. After Document Crunch, here's what's happening. Same project manager is coming in my office saying, "Josh, something happened on my job site. I reviewed in Document Crunch the delay provisions, and I understand that this is, gives me an extension of time. I reviewed the notice provisions, and I clicked in that customized checklist, I clicked through to your preferred notice form that you've uploaded to Document Crunch, right? The contractor or subcontractor's preferred notice form. I've clicked on the designated representative in Document Crunch, and I've actually drafted the letter now because I have access to all that information in real time that's been customized for me. So instead of Josh, what does my contract say? What do I do? It becomes, hey, Josh, or senior executive, or whoever it is in your organization, this has happened on site. I've taken this a few steps further than I used to take it. Do you mind putting eyes on my notice letter? That's the switch that we're going for. That's just on the project management or administration side. This that you're looking at here is what's being used to help with bid qualifications or to make go, no-go decisions, right? Some contractors or subcontractors are simply using this, going back to the democratizing the subject matter expertise, just for training, right? How are you assuring that your new employees that are coming in every single day that are in far-flung places, not necessarily at headquarters, understand the, XYZ contractor way of doing things. So these customizations are really your white box to work with us to help instill the things that matter to you around these contracts, however you're using them, education, bidding, administrating, et cetera. But those are just a few examples of how this is actually working in real time. So I mean, they've gone on the record and said this publicly, so I'm not giving away any secrets. Balfour Beatty, has anybody here worked with Balfour Beatty before or heard of Balfour Beatty? I assume some have. Well, they're now making project executives fill this out before sending it to the legal department, right? When making go no-go decisions on whether to bid jobs. So, you know, the use cases are really varied depending on who it is, but those are just some real examples of how customization is actually being used by folks. And we'd love to hear from you all if you had any ideas as well. But, you know, we're seeing some commonalities around those kind of various pain points in the process.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Josh or Adam? Getting a lot of great stuff here in the chat box, team. You know, Josh, Adam, at the end of the day, in the heavy litigated world that we live and operate in unionized construction or any construction for that matter, I really think your product is a breath of fresh air that will ultimately save its end users, you know, time, money, and stress. And I applaud you for your outside the box thinking in streamlining a sometimes tedious and expensive process. So I can't thank you guys enough for spending some time here with us this morning. Josh, if you want to send me over your slide deck, I will gladly share that with all the participants. And if anyone has any questions or needs to get in touch with Josh or Adam, in the meantime, please contact me. I have their contact information. I would be happy to put you in contact with them. And I want to thank everyone for their time this morning, and just want to remind everyone that our next industry hour will be Wednesday, March 24th on what can you expect from your inspection agency. And that class will be facilitated by the United Inspection Agency's Director of Code Compliance, Mr. Jim Dollar. So if there are no other questions, I want to thank everyone for your time this morning, especially Josh, Adam, Kyle, Lindsay. It's so good to see you guys and learn a little bit more about your product. Josh has put his email address in the chat box for anyone that would like it. Or Lindsay, feel free to contact them. And Josh, Adam, thanks a lot, guys. Awesome presentation. Greatly.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone's time.